But let's go to the situation in Russia, which over the weekend almost boiled into full-blown civil war. On Saturday morning, the Wagner Group, the Russian paramilitary organisation, funded in part by the Russian government for many years, initiated a rebellion against the President Vladimir Putin. The group seized control of the Russian southwestern city of Rostov, which is near the Ukrainian border. They were advancing north towards Moscow when their leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, stood down and then withdrew his troops. It's reported that the now failed rebellion was initiated due to escalating tensions between the Russian Ministry of Defence and Prigozhin, who has even accused the Putin government of waging war, he says, to benefit Russian oligarchs. Now, in response, Putin said that the Wagner Group's actions equated to treason. Prigozhin is now in exile in Belarus, which is a satellite state of Russia. Joining me now to discuss all of this, the Director of Strategic Analysis Australia, Peter Jennings. Well, it's all a bit complicated, Peter, and I know we're reading the tea leaves here. I listened to James Clapper, whom I regard well, who said, look, it's all a bit fishy the way this has ended up. Prigozhin now in Belarus. Give us your take. I mean, clearly Putin's in trouble, but give us your take on what you think is going on in Moscow.
So, Peter, I think the essence of it is to say that we're only part way through a process of watching Putin's power structures crumble inside Russia. I think of the analogies of the Russian military rebelling in 1917 before the revolution. And I think the most important thing that Prigozhin has done as the head of the Wagner Group has been to sort of expose the nonsense of Putin's propaganda about why the war was taking place. NATO is not poised to attack Russia. There are no collections of fascists in Ukraine. It was all essentially a lot of hyper-nationalist nonsense designed to sort of keep Putin in power. And I think the real test in the next few days will be watching the Russian military. How many of those conscripts, having heard Prigozhin sort of expose the lie of Russia's reasons for invading, will want to go into the battlefield and fight? I think the risk of the Russian military now walking from their posts has to be pretty high. So this is not over. This is probably just, the first round, Peter, I think, in what is going to be a story over the rest of 2023 of Russia, of the foundations of Putin's control now crumbling.
So just let me pick up that point you were making there about the troops. So the troops that marched out of Ukraine on their way, but didn't get there, but on their way to Moscow, before they were stood down, have they gone to Belarus or are they expected to go back to the Ukraine war? And are you saying that that's the grouping, the Wagner grouping, that may well not return to the battlefront?
No, I think this could be more generally, not so much amongst the mercenaries, but across the larger Russian military, where there's been this split between Prigozhin's people and the Russian army more generally. I mean, we're talking about a conscript army, potentially, Peter, in the order of 100,000 Russians killed in the last 18 months, and an equivalent number, if not more, wounded. These people need to have a reason to fight. And if they've just been told by Yevgeny Prigozhin that it's all a lot of nonsense, why would they choose to go into battle to continue to do that? So I think that's a problem. Then I think there's the question of, what happened with this march on Moscow that stopped a couple of 100 miles short. And I think two things here, Peter, which is just speculation, but worth sharing all the same. One is that group driving down a highway is clearly a target, in just the same way that the Russian military going down those highways towards Kyiv 18 months ago was a target. And Prigozhin would have known that. So imagine a circumstance where Putin says, look, a couple of 100 million, Yevgeny, if that's what it takes, you can have that, go off to Belarus and go quiet for a while. I just wonder if Prigozhin's not been paid off, realising that he probably couldn't get his forces to Moscow. And that the capital would be too well defended and they would be chopped up, and that's the end of Prigozhin. He lives
a lot of sense there,
Peter.
A lot of sense there, because because he goes to a safe haven like Belarus. There were charges. Those charges were dropped. I don't know anyone else in recent history who's been able to threaten Vladimir Putin's life and his empire and his many, many millions and suddenly get away scot-free, which is what appears to have happened over the weekend. So I think you're right, there's a lot more to play out.
So far.
Let's go to the Prime Minister's announcement today. $110 million, we were told, 70 more military vehicles. Now, there's 56 of these vehicles that are not current carriers. They're obsolete vehicles. They haven't got the Hawkeyes they want. Insiders have spoken to me this afternoon and said that $110 million is not new money. It's reallocations out of the defence portfolio. And it's a long way from what President Zelensky had been petitioning Australia to provide. Here's Peter Dutton, have a listen.
The Defence has provided a lot of assistance so far, but they can't continue to do it from existing resources. They need additional support from the government, and this has taken too long and is too little. If President Zelensky is now asking for Hawkeyes, they should be provided.
Right, give me your assessment, Peter.
I can't for the life of me understand why the government is being so slow and so limited in terms of its thinking about what it needs to do. I think Albanese understands very well that this is, frankly, something that is vital from the point of view of Australia's interests, that democracy's support a fellow democracy once it's been attacked by an authoritarian regime. And for us to sort of, go to really the discards of our current military capability and not to provide Hawkeye and Bushmaster, which are, current equipment, perfectly effective for what it is the Ukrainians need to do with it. To me, it just sort of shows that somehow the urgency and the intensity has been lost, and it's been replaced with slow bureaucratic process that's not doing what it should do as quickly as it should to support Ukraine. Overall, it's very disappointing.
Just quickly, do you think he's holding off that when he gets to NATO in coming weeks, the Prime Minister might augment the offering? Is that maybe what's happening?
Look, one can only hope, Peter, because this is inadequate and insufficient and is not going to help Ukraine turn the course of the fight at precisely the moment it needs it. So I just hope that the PM kind of takes this back from the bureaucracy and does something big when he goes to the NATO summit. If that's the plan, that's fantastic. If not, this is too little too late from Australia, which knows better and should be doing more.
And you want to beat a weakened Russia when they are weak like this. You don't want them to come back at you harder, given the nuclear arsenal that they have. Peter Jennings, thank you for your time.